Alright guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to set up one of the most OP power options that you can get in all the mods 8. You've probably seen this in the early parts of my playthrough, and you can do this very early game if you'd like to. This pretty much works in any pack that also has Mekanism, as far as I know. I could be absolutely wrong, but that's perfectly okay, because I know for a fact that it works in all the mods 8. Also, if you like these sort of guides, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know what guides you would specifically like to see from my channel. And thank you for watching. So I'm going to start by giving you an overview of exactly how all of this works first, to give you a general rundown of what happens. First off, everything here is powered by melons. They're relatively easy in the early game to get a bunch of melons, and essentially we just convert them into melon slices, and then they get piped into a Mekanism crusher. The crusher will then turn the melon slices into biofuel. The biofuel will get broken down in a pressurized reaction chamber and turn into substrates with a byproduct of ethylene. Ethylene then gets pumped into a gas burning generator to produce us power, and lots of it. This is a very simple setup to make, but it is very confusing in the beginning. And I'm going to break it down and we're going to build it together just to show you exactly how to do it and how to configure the sides and everything. And on top of that, I'm going to teach you how to upgrade this, how many gas burning generators per PRC, all that good stuff, so that you can scale this well into the mid game, even in the late game if you really like melons that much. So let's do that. The first thing we got to do is set up growing melons and automating it. Now, the easiest way to do this is making yourself some Botany Pots. These are very easy to get. You just basically need some clay smelted into terracotta, you need a flower pot, and you need some hoppers. Very simple. You're also going to need a compacting drawer from the mod Functional Storage. If you're on a different mod pack and it has something like storage drawers, that works exactly the same. There's a compacting drawer with it as well. So to start with, we want to place down our compacting drawer, and then we want to take a configuration tool and we want to lock the drawer. This is important because since we will be pulling melons out of this, we don't want to get to a point where it pulls it all out of it and our Botany Pots don't output into this anymore. So we want to make sure that it's locked. The next thing you want to do is you want to get yourself a melon slice. Now, if you don't have a way to get a melon slice, the easiest way to do that is actually to make yourself a cutting board and take any kind of knife and you can cut a melon into melon slices. But once you have yourself a melon slice, you put it in this bottom right slot, and now we are done setting up this drawer. You'll take your Botany Pot and you'll put it directly on top of it, and then this is where you'll want to grow your melons. Now, you could just use dirt if you want to. It is a type of soil item if you want to use that, but in the early game you can make farmland just as easy, just by combining it with a hoe and you get farmland. It does actually increase the speed at which it grows, so it's about a 5% increase, something like that. I could be percentage wrong here, but you could also upgrade this into inferium farmland, which is 1.1 times faster than regular dirt. That's important to note too. So I'm going to use some inferium farmland here, and then I'm going to put my melon seeds, and that's it. This one Botany Pot is set up. It will now output whatever it gets into here into this drawer, but it will automatically convert everything into melon slices. But we're not going to stop here. We're going to take some item pipes and we're going to run about 4 cables back. And this way we'll have 5 Botany Pots across the back here if we put them on top. Now before we move this, let's go ahead and shift right click with our wrench, so that way we can pull things out of here. Now, you can use any kind of item pipe that you want to, any kind of transport pipe for items. With the item pipes, if you use the pipes mod, you have to make sure that anytime that you want something to extract from something, that you have to shift right click it to give it that little notch there to show that it's actually pulling from this item. So now we just put in our farmland and our melon seeds. And now all of these should grow and then output everything into this drawer, which is good. One thing to note is that you will produce extra seeds. So what I would do is I would place something right here like a drawer and then put my melon seeds inside of here. So that way that any kind of extra seeds that don't get to go into here will output into here eventually. And this should do it for our setup for our melons. And as you see, we're already growing some melons and we got some extra melon slices going, which is good. You could always double check whenever it finishes. If it's empty, that means it pulled it into here, which we got more. Sweet. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put an item pipe beside this and then a crusher. And from this side right here, we're going to go ahead and shift click so that way we can tell this to extract the melons out of here. And if we look inside, we have melon slices. Now, I will say to make crushers and everything like that, you are going to need some Mekanism items like the basic control circuit and stuff like that. So you will need to go into Mekanism a tiny bit, but spoiler alert, you really just need a metallurgic infuser to make most of these basic pieces. So with our crusher, we're going to go ahead and set this up first. So let me explain why you use melon slices. So if we look at the crusher recipes here for melon slices, we see that we're going to get 4 biofuel per melon slice. If we take a look at some of the recipes within the crusher, we can see that it does take some organic materials like leaves, seeds, all that good stuff, and turns it into biofuel. Now you can use any kind of biofuel materials, any kind of organic materials like saplings and stuff, but we're going to do a key takeaway here. So a melon, just a melon by itself, will produce 5 biofuel, just a solid melon. But the melon slices produce 4 apiece. So 1 melon produces 5, which you can take that 1 melon, break it down into 9 slices, and you get 4 per slice. You're making 36 biofuel from 1 melon if you break it down into slices first. This makes it OP. And the biofuel is then sent into a different machine called the Pressurized reaction chamber to produce ethylene as a byproduct. This is where we get our power, but we'll get to this in a second. Let's go ahead and configure the crusher while we're here. So when you right click, you can go to the side config at the top left, and we're just going to make this very simple. And I'm going to go ahead and click on clear side config. This just clears all of the current settings so that way we could easily go through it together. So you want to figure out which side that you're inputting your items from. So for me, it is this left side, and I'm just going to left click once, and I'm going to set that to input. Then I'm going to figure out where I'm going to output my items from this, so my biofuel. And I'm going to go ahead and shove this to the right. So I'm going to click this twice, and now it's at output. Now, before I click out of here, make sure you click on this button in the top right called auto eject. So that way it auto ejects the biofuel. And if you don't have this set up, the machine won't do it. So make sure that that's set like this. And now we are done with our crusher. So next up, we have the pressurized reaction chamber. This is a much more complicated machine. So it takes an input of an item, it takes 1 input for a liquid and 1 input for a gas, and then it outputs 1 item and a gas byproduct. And then you're also going to need power, which is great. Speaking of which, we're going to power all of this at the end, so don't worry about it. So let's go ahead and configure the pressurized reaction chamber the way we're going to set this up. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click clear here, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on the auto eject on the top. I want to pull in from the left, so input from the left, and then on the top, I'm going to output my items. The byproduct for the pressurized reaction chamber that we're going to be making is called substrates. We want to make sure we output that in the top. Before we close this out, we're going to go over to gases, and we're going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to click clear on this side right here on the bottom part, and then I want to input from the back, and I'm going to output on the right side here. And that should be everything to configure for the pressurized reaction chamber. So simple enough, we can actually just connect these two with an item pipe, or if you want to, you can actually just place it right beside it and it'll work the same. But I'm giving some space here so that way I can show you exactly how this works. Now out of the back, I'm going to be using something called a universal pipe. And I'm just going to go 3 out here so that I can show you how this works and exactly what we're going to do with it. So this thing needs water and hydrogen. And to get hydrogen, we need an electrolytic separator. This sounds really complicated. It's really not that bad, I promise. We're going to place this down right here, and then we're going to shift click right here with our pipe wrench so that way it pulls out of the front here. The separator takes liquids and breaks them down into their components. So water is hydrogen and oxygen. So that means we need some form of water, but the pressurized reaction chamber also needs water. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place a sink right here, and then outside of the back of this, I'm going to place a fluid pipe. We're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to pull from this and then pull from this. So that way it pulls water out of this backside and it pulls water into this universal pipe. If you're wondering why I'm using a universal pipe, I would have to run a gas pipe and a fluid pipe alongside each other into this input section right here. And I don't really want to do that. If you're using Mekanism pipes, you'll want to pipe out the gas here with the pressurized pipes back into this machine, and then you'll want to pump in water using a mechanical pipe straight into it. But I'm using universal pipe, so it makes it just one long pipe, which I like. With the electrolytic separator here, we are going to configure this. We see that we already have water inside, which is good, but we want to come down here on the bottom right and make sure we set this right side to dumping excess. So the right side here will be oxygen. We don't need oxygen. Now, if you want to pump out oxygen somewhere else, go for it. But dumping excess makes it where if this fills, it will automatically start dumping it and deleting it, so that way it doesn't stop the machine. If that isn't set to dumping excess, it will stop the whole process as soon as it gets too much oxygen. We don't want that. Now for hydrogen, that's okay, because this whole system is run off of hydrogen. If hydrogen fills, it just means the machines don't need it, and it's not going to stop the whole process. So I leave this to idle. If you want to, you can set this to dumping excess, but it's not really going to matter. We're going to head over to the side config, and it doesn't matter about the items. We're going to go straight over here to the gases, and we're going to go ahead and clear this. And the way I have this set up is that I want to output on the front. So we want to make sure that we set this to output 1, so that way it outputs hydrogen and not oxygen. Whatever is in the left slot is 1, whatever is in the right slot is 2. And just to make sure, eject is on. So just to double check, you want to make sure that this pipe is got that little extract version right there, and then it's going to go straight into this pressurized reaction chamber along with the water from the sink. You could go ahead and slap yourself some pipe upgrades in here if you'd like to make it pull more water from the sink. That works too. Matter of fact, I'm just going to upgrade all of them just because I can. Before we put down our gas burning generator, we have one last step with our pressurized reaction chamber, and that is sticking one drawer right on top. Remember how I said that I want to output the substrates to the top? Well, this will automatically take the substrates. If the substrates back up in here, it shuts the whole system down, and we don't want that. So to make sure that this doesn't ever stop everything, go ahead and on this outer edge, right click with a void upgrade, so that way it voids anything over whenever it's full. Whenever this gets too full, this will just void the excess, and then you won't have to worry about it stopping your system. And now for the final part of the system, we want to put down our gas burning generator. The gas burning generator only outputs power from the front, but it can input everything else from the sides. Typically what I like to do is I like to go ahead and smack a plug right on the front of this if you're using Flux networks for wireless power. This is my preferred method of powering everything. It just depends on how you set this up, but you would need a point for the rest of the systems. But instead, what I'm gonna do, just for demonstration purposes, is we're gonna go ahead and pipe power into all of these from this front side. I'm gonna use the energy pipe here from pipes, and then I'm gonna just go down and under. Just like all the rest, we want to shift click right here to make sure that we pull power out of here. Again, anytime it's set to extract, it needs to be shift clicked here. So now if we want to get this whole thing up and running, we're going to need to give it some kind of starter power. We just need to give it a kick-starting power. So either hook it up to your previous power system, or you can just take a coal generator, smack it down, give it some coal, make sure you extract from this side, and now that should power the system. The crusher will take our melons, break it down into biofuel. Then the biofuel will come into the pressurized reaction chamber, and then it will break it down into substrate and into ethylene. It will output the substrates to the top here, and this all comes from the hydrogen that is produced by this separator in the back. Once the ethylene gets to the gas burning generator, the gas burning generator will then start stocking up on ethylene. One important note, absolutely important note, the gas burning generator only burns what it needs. It won't burn more than what it needs, okay? So with that being said, if you're not drawing enough power from it, it's just going to stock up on ethylene. What this means is that it might be confusing to some of how much power that this thing generates. In All the Mods 8, there was a recent update that did nerf the burn time of ethylene. And what this basically means is it's not producing as much power as it did, and a basic setup like this will at max be able to consistently pull 2.8 thousand FE per tick, which is pretty good in my opinion. This means a consistent pull, which means if your system needs 2.8 thousand, it will always pull 2.8 thousand. If your system needs 3,000, it's only going to output at max 2.8 after it burns through all the ethylene. So let me show you an example of what I mean. So the gas burning generator, like I said, will pull as much as it possibly can to be able to keep up with whatever the pull is. So even though I had more ethylene in here, this is how we would test to show it. So right now I have this set up to an ultimate energy cube and an energy trash can. The energy trash can will basically dump anything from this ultimate energy cube, so that way we can see that there's nothing going into this or being pulled out. And the gas burning generator will try its hardest to burn as fast as it can to keep up, but it will adjust the burn rate down low enough so where it can keep up with the pull. So with this basic setup here, we have no speed upgrades or no nothing. This should go down to about 2.8 thousand FE per tick as it slowly boils down. Now again, if you're not using 2.8 thousand consistently, the ethylene will build up. And you can also bypass this by putting the ethylene into its own tank, just so that way if you have extra ethylene production versus how much you're burning for your power, you can store that for later burning if you're going to need it later on down the road. To upgrade this, to make this setup a little bit better, the first step that you can take is just by getting some basic speed upgrades for all of your machines. This is the recipe for the speed upgrade. It just takes some glass, some osmium dust, and 2 infused alloys. Each machine can hold 8 upgrades total, so my suggestion would be to just make enough for the crusher, the pressurized reaction chamber, and of course the electrolytic separator that is so hard to say. So you can shift right click these in the world just to give them the upgrades. I know I'm in creative, so it automatically just keeps it for me since it's in my inventory, but this will increase the speed of each one of these. Now you might need energy upgrades if you start running out of energy. It depends on how much energy you're making from the system. Energy upgrades are the same exact recipe as speed upgrades, but you just need some gold dust in the middle. Again, each machine takes 8 of these. Now, with just adding those speed upgrades into each one of these, this will actually transform how much power that you can actually get out of this setup. Before, we were only producing about 2.8 thousand. With this system, it's going to balance out probably around 7,000 millibuckets of ethylene at a constant draw, and we're going to be producing around 28,000 FE per tick, which is pretty nice. It makes sense because each one of these speed upgrades increases it up to 10 times the normal effect, so 10 times the power is pretty nice for just some speed upgrades. So how would you upgrade this further? Now this is what a system would look like if you are upgrading it a little bit further. What I've done here, this is an entangled block. It's essentially just, if you don't know what entangled blocks, they're amazing. They just basically say, hey, I want to look at another block in the world, and you can interact with it like as if you had 2 of them. This is actually connected to my other melon farm that we have over here in this first compact setup. Is actually connected to it, which is pretty cool. So here we have the same exact setup, except for this time we have 3 PRCs, is what I'm going to call it from here on out. So what's happening is we've upgraded our crusher to a crushing factory. And for us to keep up with all of the production of biofuel here, we actually need 3 PRCs here. In other mod packs, it's actually a little bit different because depending on the speed or whatever of each one of these, you might need like 5 for one crusher or whatever for this basic one. Mekanism has these basic tier installers that you can use on several machines, but if you use this on a basic crusher, it will turn it into a basic crushing factory, which now gives us 3 slots instead of just 1, and coupled with the speed upgrades, we're talking about 30 times the speed. Make sure that when you do upgrade that you come over here and you turn on auto sort. This is like one of the first things that you want to make sure you do. So now we'll need 3 PRCs for our 1 crusher. And again, the only thing that I haven't done in this setup is actually make it where these substrates come out of it. So we want to make sure we do that. Simplest way to do that, stick this on top here, and I'm just going to go ahead and pipe on the sides and then set these to all output the items off the top. That way it frees up the machines so we can actually use them. So now this will produce a ton of ethylene, which outputs into the back with these gas pipes. I need to make sure that if you output them like this, that you use your pipe wrench to change them to extract. We're going to stick a pipe upgrade in each one of them. And then here we have our single gas burning generator in the back, which it is completely full. It is also pulling as much as it possibly can out of the back here. It is producing 39.76,000 FE per tick. With this setup right here, this has filled this gas burning generator up. So we want to add some more gas burning generators. I have these connected with a gas pipe in the back here, and these should automatically input over here. Then I'm going to output the energy in the front so that way we can test how much and how full these guys get. Something interesting you'll find is that instead of filling 1, now they will separate out and fill up into 3 different ones. Like for example, since we have 3 here, it's just going to go ahead and balance out between all 3 of them, and instead we get this kind of like half section here, which each of these are producing about anywhere from 28,000 to almost 29,000. Let's just say 28,000. Interesting to note here that these 2, as they pile up, it doesn't go any higher than that 39,000, even though it's over the half mark. So if these are going over the half mark here, and they get enough to that third tick. If they can fill enough up to that third tick, it's actually better for you to go ahead and make another gas burning generator. The reason why is because above that line, it's not going to produce any more than 39,000. Once it gets above this middle line, it's already burning at the max tick rate. So it's better for you to get as close as you can in multiple, so that way you produce more power. Now again, this is all if you're pulling exactly the amount of power that it needs, which is why we have this trash can here. Once these three mellow out, we'll see exactly how much power that an upgraded version can make. So now after a little bit of time, these three have mellowed out to about it looks like it's mellowing out at about 7,000 millibuckets, which in turn is about 28, let's say an average of 28.4 thousand FE per tick. And with these three producing that much, we get about 85,000 FE per tick, which is pretty nice. If we were to shrink this down to 2, we would only be getting about 79,000-ish FE per tick, which is not as good, obviously. But this is a basic setup. This is nothing that crazy. It's kind of nice. It's kind of easy. But what if we made the max setup? So aside from having to generate more melons, which by the way, I suggest on eventually upgrading your method of farming. Botany pots work, but you need a ton of them eventually. So it's either you make a bunch of them or you just go to a different method, like the phytogenic insulator from thermal. That's a pretty decent setup. As we see here, we have 9 rows for our crushing factory. These all output into 9 PRCs here, which are all outputting their substrates into the middle. This kind of looks pretty, doesn't it? All of the power and everything is coming from these universal pipes here. Just to double check that I set up all of this correctly, we're going to see that each one of these should be outputting and inputting the biofuel, which it is, and it's all working, which is good. Editing Alfred here, I wanted to go back one more time just to go over this and make sure that I show you guys all of the important parts of this final setup. I found that I've had to put a point on the electrolytic separator so that way it keeps with enough power going so that it provides enough hydrogen to all of these machines. I've also added a point right here onto the crushing factory for the same reason. I think it has something to do with the pipes themselves not being able to have as much power. So if you guys replace this with the Mekanism pipes, I think it'll actually work the same. But otherwise, I just put a point on the crusher and on the separator so that way they keep up. All of these keep up, which is perfectly fine. Otherwise, here we have them coming out of the back, pulling into 8 gas burning generators. I found that if you do any more than 8 or any less than 8, you're actually going to cripple yourself with power, because what ends up happening is each one of these guys produce about 32,000 FE per tick consistently, again with the draw because of the energy trash can, because of the way how close they get to that line right there. So at 8, these perfectly mellow out to about 32,000 a piece, and that comes out to about 256,000 FE per tick. If you add a 9th one, it actually produces less power because of it being further away from that middle spot. As you see, these are already mellowing out. Because it's mellowing out, it's going to produce less over time, but 32 seems to be the right amount. So this would be something that you'd be looking at for a max setup for just one crusher. So essentially, if you wanted to make this better, if you wanted to do more of this, because this is 256,000 FE per tick consistently, this right here, this setup, if you wanted to duplicate this, or if you wanted to replicate this in another way, all you would have to do is just copy the same setup. Again, you would need a lot more melons being produced, but otherwise, this is probably the furthest that I would go with a setup like this, because 256,000 FE per tick is actually a lot of power, and there's not really much need for much power outside of that, except for when you start getting into Mekanism's fission and fusion reactor. The fusion reactor will basically replace all of this, and I wouldn't even attempt to keep this or to make more of these, because the fusion reactor can easily produce about 30 million FE per tick. It's probably more than that with a turbine, and it's insane. It's easy to make once you have the fission reactor set up and everything, so I wouldn't expand this much further than this. This will get you pretty far. But important takeaways, just so you guys can send this home and know how to do it in your own playthroughs if you're playing all the mods 8. For every one of your crushing slots that you have, you want to have a PRC for, so that way each one of them can keep up. You see how this is staying at 58? That means it's keeping up with each one of these. These right here are producing enough and pulling enough to be able to keep up with each one of these lanes, which is good. The conversions for all the mods 8 is a little bit different. Normally you would have multiple PRCs per crusher, and then you would have multiple gas burning generators per crusher and per PRC. But in this case, because the tick rate was nerfed down to 10 per tick, what ends up happening, or the burn time is 10 ticks per millibucket, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to produce less power in all the mods 8. In my opinion, that's actually a needed change, because honestly, it just makes all of the other power options almost useless to do, like bigger reactors and stuff like that. So this balances it out well. And I think this is actually still probably one of the best, if not the best power setups, especially in the early game. These things are super easy to make. So typically you could just get by saying 1, 1, 1, 1 crusher, 1 PRC, 1 gas burning generator. But you also want to play with it like I've done, so that way you can test out what really produces the most power. And one last thing, you only need 1 electrolytic separator for all of these machines. This one thing right here can keep up with all of it if it's got enough power and it has the speed upgrades. So keep that in mind. You never have to have more than 1 separator. But this is the power of melons, baby. Guys, if you enjoyed this guide and you're looking for more guides kind of like this, please let me know. Let me know which ones you're looking for your playthrough, and maybe I'll cover it. Maybe I can figure it out. Maybe I can show you guys how to do it better. If you haven't been following my playthrough with me and my buddy Botany, go check us out. Go check the video out right now. I've got a lot of exciting things that I'm really excited to do, so go check it out. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two from that. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and go watch that episode, and bye-bye!